What's up, everybody? This video is from ElPonchis playing some NL25 on stars. In the upper right, looks like he opened with King 9 offsuit from the cutoff. Got a pretty decent flop, decent run out. It's kind of interesting on the river. We get called by this crop mystery guy to the river, and we don't know very much about him. We only have 9 hands on him, and he's 38-38. So he's raised the other hands that he's played at this point. He's got a double stack or whatever. You know, odds are he's probably a regular. You know, he could be an aggressive fish, but who knows? But it's an interesting situation because, like, there aren't that many worse hands that a regular is going to call streets with here, but at the same time there aren't very many things that he calls with pre-flop that beats us. You know, there's a few things. There's like ace 9 suited. You know, there's a few combos of 9s, 4s, 6s. There's only 5 of the combos of those though, so not very much of that. But like I say, there's also not that much worse hands that call. Like, it's pretty spewy for him to call us with any worse hand, really, without any history. But at the same time, like, even though it might be slightly bad or too thin against a regular, you know, there's still, you know, he's going to turn out to be a fish often enough where he can just have random 9x's or make spewy hero calls, or maybe he's tilted or whatever. Like, I think it's close enough that it's a pretty clear bet on the river, just because, you know, we're not beat that often either. So we might as well try. Lower left, we raise with a jack 7 suited and get min donked into by some guy who's only played 6 hands, but it looks like a fish so far. Pretty easy call down with bottom pair. Usually guys that do this, obviously you can't be very exact on putting them in a range until you see what they're doing. But one thing I will say is usually guys that do that do like the min donk every street stuff, they're almost always huge calling stations. So in this hand it's pretty easy since we actually have some showdown value just calling down. But one thing I see a lot of, like, you know, micro regs do is they just like totally spaz out and start raising, you know, these little donk bets or whatever were there, and they just get, you know, snap called by bottom pair or whatever and spew off a bunch of money. It's just assume those guys are stations until proven otherwise. And it turns out he had a queen, but his note says that he's also done that as a bluff before also, so in that case it's a pretty easy call either way. Okay, upper right, clock mystery opens under the gun. We have 10s, and he checks the flop. Usually he's just going to be check folding on the flop, but it's really weird because he check calls us here. And most regulars at NL25 are not going to have any check calling range at all in this situation. Like, you know, if they have anything that they can value bet, they're going to bet, and otherwise they're going to check fold. Once you start getting a little bit higher in stakes, there are some guys that would check call, you know, with hands like pocket 6s, 7-8 suited, something like that they're trying to like induce bets from worse because they can profitably check call or whatever, and that they don't want to bet and get raised with whatever. There's not going to be a whole lot of that from regulars at these stakes, so, you know, it's one of two things usually. Like, it could just be some fish that he has like ace king or ace queen or whatever and doesn't bet but doesn't want to fold. It could be a rare regular that has some kind of like marginal small pair thing that he's trying to get bets out of worse with, instead of like he doesn't think he can quite value bet it or whatever. But for the most part, he's not going to have a good hand. So, you know, we're almost always ahead here, other than like the case mentioned before, where you know, there are some hands that he could have had a 7 with and check called the flop. As it is, he bet pretty big there on the turn, like 3 and a 4. Like, I don't like that bet sizing, given what I think about this guy's range. Like, I think his range is just too weak. Like, I think I would bet they're smaller to try and get called again by ace high, weak pairs, and things like that. Yeah, and I hate the river bet sizing also. But, I mean, to be fair, in real time, like in that situation, it's going to be pretty hard to put a guy on a range when he's like, you know, check calling off his own lead on that board. That's pretty rare. Okay, upper left, we opened from the cutoff with a king-7 offsuit. I don't like it. You know, obviously it's pretty loose anyway, but we've got a guy with a third of a stack behind us. We only have 13 hands on him, and he's 17-0. But he's obviously a fish, so he's probably going to turn out to be looser than that. So I'm just folding pre. And as played, like, c-betting probably isn't terrible, but it's just like so many random fish turn out to have like super Broadway heavy pre-flop ranges. Like like if I see a guy, like if they're in the 30s range or whatever, like a lot of these guys, they have pre-flop calling ranges that are just like any 2 cards above a 10, pocket pairs, you know, aces, suited connectors, or whatever. But the point being, like, random fish have pretty Broadway heavy ranges. Like, given we don't know a ton about this guy, you know, it's probably okay. But just worth noting that against a lot of guys, it's going to be a check fold on that flop without a little more equity, at least. And he did say something when he posted this video, that he was going to be he was going to try to play looser or whatever because he didn't want the video to be boring. That's good and bad at the same time. Like, it will make for more like interesting hands that come up, but at the same time, like, if you're making a video to try and, you know, work on your game or whatever, you want to play like the way you're going to play. You know, if you're playing differently, you know, obviously you know, there can be things that I would point out that normally wouldn't be a mistake, or I might not notice a mistake that you would normally make, or just write it off as you're playing different for the video, whatever. You understand. And it's pretty important with pre-flop stuff too. Like, small mistakes pre-flop add up just because they come up so much over and over and over. So, like, you know, a lot of these pre-flop plays that are pretty loose, not a big deal for just making a video, but if you're to do it every day, you'd probably be bleeding quite a bit of money. Obviously, these are not speed tables. This was one thing I don't miss about Star. It's like, it should never take you, like, I mean, this King 9 down here, we've been waiting like 2 minutes for it to be our turn somehow. And we raise a little bit loose, but this guy is pretty fishy. He's got money. You know, we have some top pair value. I think that's probably okay. In that guy's range, you know, 44, you know, yeah, we don't have a bunch of hands on him or anything, but he looks loose enough that there like isn't any, there's hardly any flops we can't see bet against him other than just like doomsday flops, like 7, 8, 9 or something. On the low right, we open with a king 3 suited and get called by a tight reggish kind of looking guy. Flop a flush draw bet, and obviously betting there is fine, but I don't like that bet sizing at all. Like, we bet $1 into $1.76, just a little over half pot or whatever. In that situation, like, this guy's calling range before the flop is going to be something like pocket pairs, big aces, and a few broadways, king, queen, maybe king, jack, whatever. There's hands in his range that that can be altered whether he folds or calls depending on our bet size. Like, if he has a hand like 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, jack, it is possible that our bet sizing can make a difference between whether he calls or he folds. And it's probably not a big difference, but the thing is, when you have as much equity as you have when you have a flush draw, a good straight draw, like when you have these good draws where you get some return on your investment, like, we have a decent amount of equity, implied odds, whatever. When you have that return on your investment, like, if your bet sizing if betting more can increase your fold equity at all, like, you should do it, because like I say, the combination of the two things, getting a return on your investment, like, you definitely do better by investing that extra money. And on the turn, it looks like we're just going to check fold, which is probably okay. Like, I mean, the guy's range for calling the flop is so, like, ace 10 plus, it's pretty heavy. Like, the guy isn't probably calling with enough random stuff or whatever that, I don't mind not barreling the turn there. Although we have enough equity that it's probably kind of close. But I will say that in general, like, a lot of regulars at micro stakes are way too, like, in situations like that, they'll quite often, they're just like betting every turn no matter what, just anytime they have a flush or a straight draw. And sometimes it's just like the equity and fold equity isn't there. On the lower left, we open 4x on the button with ace 10 with this big station on the big blind. I really like that. I think that's a pretty good adjustment. Pretty obvious when he big donks into us and folding on this board. But I think a lot of players don't do enough of that. They don't change up their raise sizing to take advantage of fish as much as they should. Because with that guy, playing over half his hands or whatever, you're not going to be able to get away with raising so much junk. So if you're raising a range that, you're basically raising with hands that you want him to call you, and he's going to call you a ton. So you might as well make it big, because he's going to play all the same stuff anyway, and we're happy that he's giving us action. So you're just getting more money and good. If he was a regular or whatever, obviously we would never want to use that sizing versus someone that folds quite a bit, just because we're going to have a lot more hands that aren't profitable when we're called, but we can raise with anyway because of the fold equity. Upper left, we have a Jack 10 suited. So far, this guy on our right's been a little laggy, but only 42 hands, so whatever. Pretty easy call. Nobody behind us has been 3-betting a lot. You know, we've got kind of a fish on our left, and yeah, it's a pretty decent hand to call with anyway. Looks like so far that guy's been fairly aggressive after the flop. Pretty high aggression frequency. And we go ahead and we flop bottom 2 on ace-10 jack, which is pretty interesting because even though we have 2 pair, like this is about as weak as a flop 2 pair can be. Obviously he can have all 16 combos of the Broadway straight, the king queen, all ace 10s, all ace jacks, all sets. You know, there are tons of combinations that beat us. Not that we're not, you know, ahead of some hands too. You know, obviously we're not folding, but I think raising here would be really overplaying our hand. I think it's much better to just call and see what happens on the turn. And we do call, and the turn comes the king, which is pretty bad for us, obviously. I kind of think it's actually interesting to maybe turn your hand into a bluff there, just because, like this guy, he's hardly ever gonna have a queen, because he's not just gonna let you free roll him with random, you know, 2 pairs and stuff. Almost always people are just, you know, regs at NL25 are just gonna bet there if they have a queen and try to get called. And there's also now just like tons and tons of hands, different 2 pair hands that beat you, you know, king jack, king 10, ace jack, whatever, you know, there's and sets also. But I think, like I say, he's almost never going to have a queen. So I think if you bet turn and bet rivers, that can improve him. Like, I don't know. I think you might come out better than checking it down there. Like, you know, you're gonna be behind here. Just the range that he bets on the flop. Like, you're not in great shape against that anymore. So I actually think that bluffing there might be pretty decent. On the upper right, we raise with King Jack, flop second pair. This other guy's kind of tight, reggish looking so far. Turn card obviously is not that good for us, so we just check folding there, which is fine. We get lucky and hit a gut shot on the river, which is pretty much the nuts against this guy since he's always going to bet the turn with a flush. I'm not sure exactly what the bet sizing there would be. Like, it's hard to say, just because, like, when you go with a smaller one, it's different than the hand before where, we were up against a player that's kind of fishy. Like, against a more decent player, they might view that for exactly what it is, which is pretty obvious value bet. And it is a spot where you might be tempted to bluff if you didn't have anything. I think it's pretty close. So I think I actually like the smallish value bet size better, but I think it's really close. On the upper left, we have ace king. The short stacked 34 guy limps in. He gets raised by an aggressive looking regular so far, and we just call in the big blind. Like, I really dislike that a lot. I'm not sure why exactly we called. Like, for one thing, even though we have this fish that limped in, he doesn't even have $7, so it's not like you're gaining some huge advantage by keeping him in post flop. In fact, you're probably like giving money away just because the guy, he's short enough that, like, say he's sitting there with something like an ace jack or whatever. If you 3-bet, a lot of times he's just going to be, he's just going to F it, put it in there or whatever, not fold. And I'm definitely not giving this regular's range so much credit that I can't 3-bet him with an ace king. I mean, there's definitely some guys that have tight enough opening ranges and tight enough continuing ranges versus a 3-bet that I would just call them with an ace king. But we don't really have enough information to go that far. Like, as a default, I'm going to 3-bet with it just because people are, the average regular at these stakes is going to call with enough hands that you're just you're going to be more profitable raising until you know otherwise. So I really don't like that flag very much. And the board comes out really dry. But even so, like, it's hard to say exactly what this guy would 3-bet on this board. Like, it's obviously a board that can, miss both of us, but this other guy is so short stacked that, like, if he has anything at all, he's putting it in there. So I do tend to give a little bit of credit here, although he bets super small. I don't know. I'm probably just going to fold here. Like, even though you're going to be ahead some of the time, I just don't think you can really profitably call here with any side, just because you don't know. Well, I mean, you don't even know what this guy's thinking as far as his C betting ranges. You don't have enough history with him to know how he plays. Turn drivers, whether he would keep bluffing and whatnot. So yeah, I'm just folding there. And it looks like he's debating whether or not he wants to call or fold. My read is he's gonna call. Yeah, I don't like it though. I'm not sure what happened over here in the upper right. I'll back it up in a second. Looks like we 3-bet somebody to the queen 2. A 16-10 guy. That might not be the most solid plan either. Okay, so anyway, this guy checks back on the turn. And then he bets the river, and now I think it's also an easy fold. Like, he could easily be capable of value betting some medium strength hand. It's not like we've exactly shown a whole lot of strength here, so I don't know. Like I say, I don't really like this whole hand, to be honest, but I'm still gonna fold the river. Like, I think usually if this guy is, like if he was going to run some pure bluff, he would just probably bet on the turn as opposed to, checking through the turn and then betting the river. Okay, and let's back up here a second, because I want to see what was up with that queen 2 hand. Maybe I went too far. Hold on, I'll pause this for a second. Oh, no, there we go. Yeah, it looks like we have 32 hands on this guy, 16-10 so far. He's the small blind, running the big blind, 3-bet with queen 2. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's not too bad, but if we don't, we don't have a lot of history with him or whatever, I don't hate it. And with the pocket fives, like, you got this guy that tight players that open from the cutoff. You got kind of a hashtag guy behind you that's been pretty tight too. I think that's pretty close whether or not you can profitably call there. Like a lot of times small pocket pair out of position. If I'm in the small blind, like, I'll base my decision on who's in the big blind. Like, I like calling if it's a fishy guy in the big blind, and I hate calling if it's like an aggressive regular. With this kind of tight guy behind us, I don't know. I think it's pretty close because he's not. It's not like he's going to be, 3-betting us a ton or anything, but he's not going to be giving us much free money to help our odds either. And we 3-bet another blind versus blind situation in the lower left. I think it's okay. I mean, our hand isn't that great to call with. We don't have a lot of history with the guy. I don't know. It's probably alright. Lower right, we have a king-queen, regular-looking guy opens on the button. Another regular-looking guy in the big blind. We've got king-queen. I like to 3-bet. You know, kind of like the situation before. What I do is going to depend a lot on the big blind. When I have a guy behind me that's going to be kind of active and more likely to 3-bet and stuff like that, I'd rather just 3-bet myself with a hand that's kind of close anyway. And it's weird, we get cold called by this guy, so you know, his range could be stuff like you know, 9s, 10s, jacks, ace, queen, you know, and he can have monster hands sometimes too, or you know, just call with an ace, king or whatever. His range, most regulars range for doing that is pretty strong. We flop a gut shot on an ace high board. You know, this board hits his range a pretty decent amount. Like I say, you can have ace king, you can have ace queen, you can have 10s. When we bet, you know, if he has jacks, he may or may not fold it. If he does call with it, you know, our equity isn't that great. So I don't know. I mean, even though we flop a gut shot, like, I'm pretty scared of this guy's range, so I might not even c-bet there. I might just check fold. As it turns out, we bet, we get called. We turn a straight, which is pretty much the nuts in a 3-bet pot. You know, obviously he can have flushes, but we're not that worried about it because he's usually not calling us with, you know, any low hands or whatever, so there aren't very many combinations of flushes. And then the river is pretty crappy for us, obviously. We're never beat by any heart. I would just check fold here. You know, there aren't really very many things this guy can turn into a bluff. You know, people just don't do it that often. At these levels, I think usually like, near head, he's just going to check back here. So I would just check fold. And it looks like we go for the super small bet, which I don't know. I think check folding is better, but it's probably not terrible, I guess. Okay, on the upper right, we open with a jack-9 in the small blind, and we get 3-bet by this you know, ecstatic truth guy who's been kind of tight. He's 3-bet us a couple times. You know, small blind versus big blind. He 3-bet our button. Even though he's 3-bet a decent amount, he's tight. He's playing less than half a stack. Like, you know, it's pretty unlikely that this guy is, you know, he might be 3-betting kind of wide, but I don't think he's going to be 3-betting light. a ton. Like, you know, I can see him 3-betting us with hands like, you know, ace jack and pocket eights and stuff like that more than I can see him 3-betting us with hands like 6-8 suited or whatever. Like, so I really hate this shove. I think this is just kind of like a frustration shove because this guy's been 3-betting us. I mean, when we get called, our equity is pretty much gonna suck. So he's gonna have to fold, you know, quite a bit for this to be profitable. Which, you know, I'm sure he folds a decent amount, but probably not enough. And on the lower right, we've got eights. We get 3-bet a guy by guy who we have almost 500 hands on. His 3-bet is 3.8%. We're 100 blinds deep, so I'm just going to fold over the eights because the guy's range is just too strong. Like, you know, you can't really do much there. Like, you don't get odds for a pure set mine, and the guy's range isn't loose enough to do like some sort of semi-set mine. So unless you have some sort of like ninja post flop read on him, like, I don't like that call. But as it turns out, we flop a set. The guy's really thinking about it, which could mean a lot of things. I wouldn't read too much into that. But more than likely, he's probably just playing like a zillion tables. Okay, so the guy check calls the flop. His range, though, has a lot of pretty good hands in it. Like, he can even have hands like aces without a heart. He can have stuff like queens, jacks, tens with a heart. So when he check calls that flop, like a lot of times he'll have a pretty good hand that was just like wants to see if its equity is going to get better or worse on the turn kind of stuff. And since the turn is a brick, that's like an awesome card for us because it's an awesome card for him. Like, it doesn't hurt any of the hands that he was check calling, or at least most of them. You know, that's a pretty good card for him. So we should really just be bombing the turn now. Because if he doesn't have a hand, like say he has like black aces, like aces without a heart, like you know, he's definitely gonna call a big turn bet now that he got the card that he wanted. But you know, if a heart falls on the river, he might give it up then. So I would deviate from, you know, your standard get your stack in sizes here, and I would make a pretty big bet on the turn. If he ever goes. Yeah, there we go. And he makes like a little bit over half pot, which is, like I say, I like the bigger size here. Like in general, I would like his sizing, but in this specific case, just like given what his range is, I really like a bigger bet there. And you know, obviously, it'll be a very easy river shove. And we get called by queens with a heart, which is, I don't know, I think that's a pretty bad call by that guy on the river, just because, you know, unless we're really retarded or something, you know, we're not going to be bluffing there on the river. Like, it's not like he looks like he's going to be folding there much. So, I don't know. Pretty spewy call by that guy. But whatever. Anyway, that's about it for this video. Hope you liked it.